Hi and welcome to another video. In today's video I'm gonna show you a game of the second world champion Emanuel Lasker with the white pieces against a guy named Bauer Johan with the black pieces. In this game he's still very young, in his early 20s, and he's showing a great attacking game, which finish some of you might have seen in some tactics or puzzle books. But let's start from the beginning, and the game started with f4, the bird's defense. So black answered d5 and white was developing his pieces quite harmoniously, but objectively speaking, black is doing quite okay here, and after knight e2, black could even have reached an advantage by several moves because he's just having more influence in the center, and he could, for example, try to grab the pair of bishops with knight c5, or also just sit in the center with this knight and then employ the other knight to f6 maybe, or even neutralize the dark square bishop. So this is a moment where things went down a little bit for black, who is not taking his chances. Instead he continued with the very logical looking c5, but later it turns out that he's just a bit too slow. Anyway, c5 is not yet a mistake, and white continues bringing his knight over to the king side, getting ready for an attack. And also here black should have done something else than in the game. Queen c7, just developing the queen, is a bit too standard here. He should maybe pay attention to his opponent's ideas and try to prevent some knight jumps, also some knight jumps to here. And latest after queen c7, knight e5, he should have played something like g6, preventing this knight from joining the game. And honestly, the knight on g3, it looks really useless if black is playing g6 here. So then black would still have control. But in the game he took on e5, which already leads to quite a bad position if white took with the pawn, which he didn't. Let's have a look. What is happening here? Why is this so great for white? So in general, this pawn is of course in the way of the bishop, but on the other hand it also is closing away black's pieces from the king side, and also it's expelling the last defender of black's king side. And so it's not easy to imagine how black's pieces can come over and defend, because this pawn is just limiting black by a lot. For example, black could go passive with knight e8, but then white has a free hand on the king side. He could also jump here, but then we again see that those pawns here on the e-file, they will stay there for a very long time, and they will prevent any black piece from joining, and white can slowly build up an attack on the f-file and on g7 on the dark squares and try to checkmate the black king. A sample line could go something like rook d8. Black is trying to get any counterplay on the queen side, but it's not really easy to get this bishop into the game. Meanwhile, white is attacking, trying to open the h-file later with h5 and blocking the d-file and then bringing the rooks over, and it's getting dangerous. At some point we will jump here, but yeah, the technical part of course remains. It's not as easy, and we cannot jump very early because after this the black rook is ready to join the defense sometimes. So white is probably just planning to take with the rook there later, and still the black pieces just cannot join the game because white has blocked center, and we will try to push the pawn, maybe take on g6, sometimes also push h6, trying to create real threats, and black is in huge trouble. So that's a missed chance in the game, but his move of course looks quite human and quite logical, honestly, because he doesn't want to close in the bishop. Also he's getting this bishop ready to attack the black king as well, and all the other pieces are ready too. Black could have played queen d8 trying to solidify the f6 knight, which might have been useful for later, but he decided to create kind of a threat targeting g2 and intending d4. In this situation, white could have played knight h5 anyway. Black could answer with something like d4. White is better here, and this would have been the best option. However, in the game, white played queen e2, protecting g2 first, but now black again had the chance to foresee white's threat and prevent it with g6, and then things are not so easy. However, after queen e2, black played a6, which is terribly slow and just preventing a move which we were not really aiming for. Instead, white was probably already here intending to attack on the king side because he has a majority of pieces there, which is a good start to launch a successful attack. So if you want to think about the position a little bit on your own, you can think what is white playing after knight takes h5. Black basically has no other choice here, because, for example, knight to e8 would run into the tactics bishop takes, and if knight takes, there is queen g4 with a deadly attack. So back to my question, how should white proceed after knight takes h5? Take your time, and we will continue right now with the solution, which is bishop takes h7. And this will destroy black king's shelter completely, and after this white is just having a winning attack. So let's see, why do we need to sacrifice? Why can't we take here? Because black has the chance to close our bishop out and we don't have enough pieces to launch a successful attack. So that's why we should play it in a more aggressive way, sacrificing the bishop, really giving no time for black to close the position with f5. Okay, king takes, queen takes, and the king goes back. And now it's a question how to continue the attack. If you want to challenge yourself and you don't know this example so far, take your time and think about how would you continue. Let's have a look at some moves you might think about. So maybe you were wondering, is it possible to play rook to f3? It's certainly an interesting attacking idea. It's not the most forcing one, and maybe black can try to defend with something like f6. This bishop will not be attacking, and something like rook to h3 is actually not threatening mate because the black king might just run away. So it's an interesting idea, but things become quite messy after f6. So once we realize this, we might wonder if we can join the attack with the bishop first before we bring the rook. And we should always start with checking and capturing moves, and then we could try bishop takes g7, not only taking a pawn but also threatening mate in one. So black doesn't have such a wide choice. He can maybe try to move the f-pawn to run away, or he can accept the sacrifice. We will first check the moves of the f-pawn, because capturing was the game, and we will have a look at this in detail. So let's see. After f6, how could we continue the attack? In general, we don't want to take the material yet, because he would still have two bishops versus rook plus two pawns, which would be kind of okay, but we still want to play for mate. And once we see bishop h6 threatening checkmate and queen coming to g7 mating, this is just game over. Black has no real moves. Some attempts, but they all fail. For example, here it's mate. Or also, if the king goes to the h file, we take the rook for free, which is of course also winning. And I'm afraid there is nothing else. Rook f7, queen g6 drops the whole rook, as the king needs to go to h8 here. So bishop h6 is winning here, and if f5, for example, bishop e5 with the threat of queen g6, is just, yeah, killing black here. Queen e8 also doesn't help. The mate is there on g7 again, and also the rook move doesn't help as there is a mate on h8. So we made sure that in those cases he wants to run, we also win. Now, and of course that's the most important thing, we need to check what if he captures. So if you want to challenge yourself again, you can think about how to start the attack. Should we start with queen g4 or with rook f3 and why? So we will continue, and in general I would say this is more like a comparison of moves. Well, why is that? If I start with rook f3, he has a lot of options. He might even run to f8 in one or another variation, and if I instead force him to the h-line first, then he just doesn't have those options, and that's why this is much more forcing. Black has less options, and yeah, we can just decide this by comparing the lines. Note that king f6 is not possible due to queen to g5, and once the king goes to the h-file, we can quickly calculate that after rook f3 there is not much black can do to prevent the mate. Only e5 is a move, but after this he loses the queen, and after that a bishop, which is quite an important detail, but here game is basically over. They played on quite a bit, but after white opened the position, he sacrificed on f6, giving up the exchange but winning a rook now because d8 is hanging, and after king e8 white could pick up the other rook. And after this black played on for a while, but after the very nice queen d3, black of course didn't like to play on because white can even give the queen and win the pawn, ending very easily. So that's it, a very famous double bishop sacrifice. I hope you enjoyed this game, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.